My very dear friend and brother, Vaikoji,
only 1 minute. அவருடைய பேச்சுக்கு தடங்கள் இல்லாமல் அவர் ஆங்கிலத்தில் உரையாற்றுவார். அது முழுமையாக பேசியதற்கு பிறகு அதன் சாரத்தை உள்வாங்கி இலகணேசன் அவர்கள் உங்களுக்கு தருவார்.
Thiru L. Ganeshan, Shri Manian, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I have come here this evening at the invitation of my dear friend and brother Vaikoji, and I have come to Chennai only for this function. Today, as he says, and we know, is the Human Rights Day, which is celebrated the world over. But how many organizations or individuals are celebrating the Human Rights Day today? Perhaps very few. And I give full credit to Vaikoji that he not only remembered that 10th March is the Universal Human Rights Day, but he decided to organize this function here in Chennai and invite all of us to share a few thoughts on this occasion. And it is but natural then when we assemble to observe the Human Rights Day, our thoughts travel to those less fortunate brothers and sisters anywhere in the world who have been deprived of their human rights. Vaikoji talked of the Holocaust. That was before the Second World War, and that is the reason perhaps that after the war, the US President thought of a new charter of universal human rights, which will not only be universal, but will also be fully egalitarian, which means that it will be spread in all the lands of the world, all the countries of the world, and will be applicable equally to every individual. So if I have some rights, my brothers and sisters elsewhere in the world will also have the same right. As we are aware, 2 years later, when the Constitution of India was adopted, we put all these human rights in our Constitution as fundamental rights, and a part of it as the directive principles of a state policy. But 66 years down the line, from 1948 to 2014, 66 years down the line, we have to pause and take stock of where we stand vis-a-vis the observance of human rights the world over. And when we look around, I find two areas where there has been gross violation of human rights and the world has just looked on. India, which is the most powerful nation in the center of South Asia, has been merely a spectator. One of this is an old issue. When I say old, I mean about 60 years. And that is in the north of India, in Tibet. The Han Chinese marched into Tibet, occupied Tibet. The government of India then just looked on. We were spectators. They annexed Tibet, and since then, a genocide has been going on in Tibet, and the old Tibetan culture and civilization is being destroyed. There is ethnic cleansing taking place. Tibetan women are forced to marry Han Chinese so that the Tibetan race is destroyed. And we are all helpless in the face of this Chinese aggression. The other more recent violation of human rights is what we have witnessed in our neighborhood in Sri Lanka. And when Vaikoji was trying to show me that small little movie on the excesses committed, which has been broadcast on Channel 4, it is a fact that I could not watch it beyond 5-10 seconds. Because it's so horrible. I think it is inhuman even to watch it. There are many sins a person can commit. But the biggest, the most horrendous sin that a person can commit is to defile a dead human body. We are entitled to some dignity in death. If I am dead, everything is gone. All my sins have been washed away. There is nothing anymore that I can do. But as I lie there, or my body lies there, inert, helpless, is it open to someone to come and defile my body? And that too in a manner which is not even inhuman, which is not even animal. It is worse than animal. And we watch in silence. We watch in helplessness. Mankind is really not so helpless. And certainly the people of India are not helpless. Vaikoji was referring to that meeting that he had organized in Delhi in August 2011. In August 2011. And when the Lok Sabha debate took place in March 2013, and I was preparing for that, for my speech in Lok Sabha, I thought if I express sympathy with the Tamils of Sri Lanka now, people will say it is now that you're doing it. What did you do when this was happening? And therefore, I did some research to find out what exactly I had said in 2009 and what I had said subsequently before this debate in Lok Sabha took place. And I am going to quote to you from what I said in that speech in Lok Sabha. I said, my friend Shri Vaiko, who used to be a member of this house, because I have always regretted that Vaiko ji is not in Lok Sabha. He is such an asset in Lok Sabha. So I said he came to me in August 2011 to invite me to join one of his protest rallies in Delhi against the genocide of Tamils in Sri Lanka. In his meeting with me, he told me that he had met the Prime Minister and the Prime Minister had told him that India could not impose economic sanctions against Sri Lanka as it would encourage China to displace us as a strategic and trading partner of Sri Lanka. When I asked Sri Vaiko whether I could quote him publicly, he said I could. So when I went to address his rally, I naturally pointed out to this statement and said that this represented helplessness on the part of the government of India. And I do not agree that we should formulate our policy, especially our neighborhood policy, in a state of helplessness. I have said subsequently in that speech that you don't conduct the foreign policy of a nation from a position of weakness. You always conduct against anyone, even against the US. You conduct your foreign policy from a position of strength. You do not conduct your foreign policy out of diffidence. You conduct your foreign policy out of confidence. You do not conduct your foreign policy as a subaltern, as somebody who is a client. You conduct your foreign policy as a master, as a commander. This is the way foreign policy should be conducted. And if the other side knows that this is the manner in which you will conduct your foreign policy, he will give you much greater respect than otherwise. And therefore, when Manyanji was quoting the speech of Narendra Modi when he visited Arunachal Pradesh and warned China against its mindset of expansionism. That was conduct of foreign policy out of confidence and strength. Did China respond aggressively to that? No, China did not respond aggressively. China, in fact, was very guarded in its comment. They said, no, we don't have expansionist mindset. Because they knew that within 3 months, Narendra Modi will be the Prime Minister of India, and that they will be dealing with somebody who will talk to them from a position of strength and not from a position of weakness. I collected this from the Hindu. This is the latest meeting that our Prime Minister has had with the Sri Lankan President. They met on the sidelines of the BIMSTEC conference recently in Myanmar. And I was wondering what came out of this meeting. So I looked at this news item very, very carefully. This was a few hours after the US, UK, along with 3 others, had moved their resolution in the Human Rights Council in Geneva against Sri Lanka. And what did the Prime Minister, according to the briefing of the media, was done by no less a person than the External Affairs Minister of India. And what did the Prime Minister say? He underlined the case of demilitarization of Jaffna Peninsula. And the reply he got was, Rajapaksa said he had already scaled back troops from a wartime peak of 175,000 and promised that a further drawdown will take place as demining and reconstruction operations are completed. No time limit. There is no time limit. And there is no indication of by how much will the drawdown take place. How many troops are there and how many troops will be withdrawn. Nothing of the kind. Then Dr. Singh and Mr. Rajpakshe also discussed the arrest of fishermen who had transgressed from the maritime border. And Mr. Rajpakshe said, what's the problem? There are Tamils on that side, there are Tamils on this side. That is all. No assurance, absolutely, on why he is committing those excesses with the fishermen of India and how they are being tortured and done to death in Sri Lankan camps. Nothing, no assurance. Why? Because the present Prime Minister is not only a lame duck Prime Minister. In fact, he has always been a lame duck Prime Minister. He has always been a lame duck Prime Minister. And therefore nobody takes him seriously in the rest of the world. Not even Maldives, not even Sri Lanka. That is the tragedy today. But these two people who shook hands in Myanmar, it's difficult to say which hand carries more blood of the Sri Lankan kind. Of course, I feel for our brothers and sisters in Sri Lanka. But I'll keep emotion aside and will try and talk to you as reasonably as possible, because these are serious issues of diplomacy which should be looked upon as coolly as possible so that we are able to reach the right conclusions. I said in my Lok Sabha speech that the government of Sri Lanka chose the time for this genocide very, very carefully. The campaign started around March 2009 and ended before the results of the Lok Sabha elections were announced in May 2009. Like now, all of us had elections on our mind. All of us were preoccupied with campaigning in our constituencies and elsewhere. And therefore, who was paying attention to what was happening in the rest of the world? Very little attention was being paid. Deliberately, carefully, that particular moment was chosen by Sri Lanka to strike against the LTTE. And I said, and the congressman listened, there was not a single intervention by them. Sonia Gandhi was sitting there. Salman Khurshid was sitting there as Minister for External Affairs. Nobody from the Congress benches got up and said, Yasvanth Sinha, you are wrong. And I have said in this speech that the UPA government was fully complicit in the genocide of the Sri Lankan people. Fully complicit. You were quoting the Criminal Procedure Code, the Constitution of India. In the Indian Penal Code, the murderer, actually the wielder of the weapon, and the person who conspires with him, both are equally guilty. Both are equally guilty. So it does not matter who fired the shots. It does not matter who used the bayonets. What matters is those shots should not have been fired, those bayonets should not have been used if the government of India had not given clearance for it. I said in this speech that it is the Indian Navy which destroyed the Sea Tigers. And that not only broke the back of the LTTE because they could not get the supplies, it also blocked all their escape routes. Who asked the Indian Navy to do it? Was it Rajpakshe? Did he order the Indian Navy to do this? Destroy the Tamil Sea Tigers? No, it was the government of India. And therefore, if Rajpakshe is guilty of genocide, so is the UPA government in equal way. And so are the partners of the UPA from Tamil Nadu. There is no point in shedding crocodile tears now. They knew what was happening in Sri Lanka. Who would know it better than those who were in power in Tamil Nadu, in Chennai in those days? and therefore they are also equally guilty. Five years have gone by. I can't hold back my tears when I recall the face of that young boy, 12-year-old boy, who is shown sitting in a bunker. Then he is given a biscuit to eat, and then his bullet-ridden body lying on the ground. What crime had he committed? That 12-year-old boy, what crime had he committed? Why did he have to die? The war was won. Prabhakaran was dead. The Tamil genocide had taken place. But the violence had not ended. And the violence has not ended even today. Even today, the Sri Lankan army in the Jaffna Peninsula is committing the same crimes. And the reason why Rajpaksha will not withdraw his army from Jaffna is because he is still not finished with ethnic cleansing in Sri Lanka. He is not finished. And that is why they say that the job is only half done. He will hold out all kinds of promises, never implement them. He will neither implement what his own people have recommended through the LLRC. He will not recommend what the Human Rights Council and the Commissioner for Human Rights tells him to do. He will not implement the resolutions of the Human Rights Council. He will not implement anything because he knows that India is helpless, but only for the next 3 months, not after that. Let it be noted that this helplessness that the Prime Minister of India showed or mentioned to Vaikoji is going to end within 3 months. And within 3 months, the situation is going to change dramatically. Not because we are going to send Indian troops into Sri Lanka, but because a strong man will occupy the chair of the Prime Minister of India. What was the situation? Ganeshanji was asking me. When we were in government, 98-2004, again, I like to quote from my speech. Talking about a neighboring country with which we've had the best of relationship in the past is a very tricky business. And I said, Madam, I recall that I spent a couple of years in the Ministry of External Affairs, and that dealing with Sri Lanka was one of the easiest jobs while dealing with all our neighbors. Each one of them had some issue or the other, but it was only with Sri Lanka that we could deal with on the basis of sovereign equality without any hang-ups either on their side, on our side. And as the whole House is aware, we have had a close and civilizational relationship with Sri Lanka. And I went on to say that therefore, the tragedy of Sri Lankan Tamils is one of the greatest tragedies of our times. It didn't take place when Vajpayee was the Prime Minister. Why didn't it take place when Vajpayee was the Prime Minister? Mr. Vajpayee conducted the nuclear tests. And the most powerful countries of the world imposed economic sanctions on India, including the US. I was the finance minister. Mr. Vajpayee called me and said, Yasvanth Sinha, you look after the interests of India. We are not going to any country of the world to ask them to plead with them to withdraw the sanctions. We will not go to them. He said, let those countries realize themselves that imposing sanctions on a country like India will hurt them more than it will hurt us. And then gradually we waited. We didn't go to anyone. We didn't plead with them, please withdraw sanctions. They themselves started withdrawing sanctions one by one. And the USA, Vajpayee did not travel to the US for a bilateral visit. It was President Clinton who came to India. And before he landed on the Indian soil, the sacred soil of our motherland, he had withdrawn the sanctions by a presidential decree. Similarly, when Kargil took place and the Pakistani intruders came into our territory, you will recall that President Clinton invited both Nawaz Sharif, who was the Prime Minister of Pakistan, and Prime Minister Vajpayee to come to Washington and discuss the issue. Nawaz Sharif went. Vajpayee told him, I am not coming until we have thrown out the last of the Pakistanis from our sacred soil. That was the courage and the determination that we had shown. And that is the courage and determination that we are going to show again. The world will realize, as will Sri Lanka, that a regime change in India is not merely a regime change, it's a complete change in the personality of the government of India. And I had said in this city itself once before, when my party had organized a similar meeting, I had said, all that we have to do is to whisper in the ears of Rajpakshe. Please listen to us, as the previous governments in Sri Lanka have listened to us. And if you don't, be prepared for the consequences. Just that. The Prime Minister of India is talking about demilitarization or withdrawal of the Sri Lankan troops. 1 year ago, when I was finishing my speech in the Lok Sabha, I made 7-8 suggestions to the government of India. The first was, I said, please urge upon the government of Sri Lanka to withdraw its army from the northern province. That was the first suggestion. The second was, let them sincerely implement the recommendations of the LLRC. The third was, let them implement without any further delay the provisions of the 13th Amendment and more. 13th Amendment plus. Then I said, let an impartial inquiry be held into the charges of genocide and atrocities against the civilian Tamils by the Sri Lankan forces during the Elam War, and it should be absolutely impartial inquiry with outsiders, people from outside Sri Lanka, so that the truth comes out. Then I said, fifth, let there be a clear commitment on the part of the Sri Lankan government that after the inquiry, the guilty shall be punished suitably. And I said, sixth, let India not merely vote in the Human Rights Council. I said, let India take the lead in drafting the resolution of the Human Rights Council. And then I said, finally, and most importantly, I said, let India convey in no uncertain terms to the other nations in our neighborhood and to the world at large that any undue interference by them in the affairs of Sri Lanka or in India-Sri Lanka relationship will not be acceptable to India. Just tell them, whether it is China, whether it's Pakistan, whether it's Japan, whether it's any other country, tell them your interference in Sri Lanka is not acceptable. If the Americans can live with the Monroe Doctrine in the southern hemisphere of the US, then why can't we have our own doctrine as far as the South Asian countries are concerned? Why are we scared that China will interfere in Sri Lanka? And that's when I said, no foreign policy is conducted out of fear. We can't be scared of China all the time and say, they will replace us in Sri Lanka. How will they replace us in Sri Lanka? Like Hanuman, we must realize our strength. And just as he crossed the Park Straits, we can cross it any day. And therefore, when I invited Sri Vaiko, I said, if they don't listen, let's take an armada to Sri Lanka. But we'll not go with guns, we'll go with roses. We'll go peacefully, let the world watch. But let them also realize that we mean business, that we shall not allow our brothers and sisters in Sri Lanka to be trampled upon anymore. That is the message which must go out loud and clear. I only hope, sir, that next year, 1 year from now, when we shall assemble here to celebrate the Human Rights Day, things will be different. Things will be different. They'll be as different as things indeed were when Vajpayee was the Prime Minister of India. And I am not revealing a secret to you. Our contacts with the government of Sri Lanka were at various levels, but very rarely at the level of the Prime Minister, because all the issues were resolved at levels below him. It was only when we felt the need, we went to report to him what is it that we had agreed upon. But there was not a single step which the government of Sri Lanka took without taking India into confidence. And I am sorry to say this, that subsequently, whenever I have visited Sri Lanka, the impression that I have gathered is, Government of India has lost all its clout, that Rajpaksha is not willing to listen to the Government of India. And with what face will the Government of India tell him to do justice to the Sri Lankan Tamils, where they themselves have been complicit in this genocide? That is their weakness. That is why Manmohan Singh cannot look eye to eye with Rajpaksha. That is the weakness. And therefore, right down the line, India's diplomatic position has been weakened. I can assure you today, and I really hope to God, and I urge upon all of you and all those friends who are outside to whom you will convey this message, Vaiko must return to Lok Sabha. We want to hear his voice, strong voice, in favor of the Sri Lankan Tamils. I'll be there to assist you, sir. And together we shall march. Together we shall ensure that full justice is done to our brothers and sisters in Sri Lanka. Together we shall fashion those policy initiatives, those diplomatic initiatives which are necessary to achieve this end. And together we shall ensure that justice. But it's important that you are there. 3 powerful speeches have been made here this evening, barring mine. 1, 2, and Pon Radhakrishnan, who had to leave. But let this message go loud and clear from this hall, throughout the length and breadth of Tamil Nadu, that even worse than the sin of defiling dead bodies is the sin of voting for the Congress party. It is the sin of voting for the collaborators of the Congress party in Tamil Nadu. Let these forthcoming elections send a very clear verdict, not only about who the Prime Minister of India will be after the elections, but how we shall deal as far as justice for the Sri Lankan Tamils is concerned. Let these twin messages go from this election. I would have come to this function in any case, because Vaikoji is such a dear friend, and I never disobey him, either here or in Delhi. But I am doubly happy that we are together politically again. I am doubly happy. And I am quite sure that with our strength, combined strength, and the strength of other friends who will be with us, it will be possible for us to ensure in the coming elections that the people of Tamil Nadu do justice to their brothers and sisters in Sri Lanka. The vote must reflect that. I'm sorry I have taken a lot of your time. But no, I'm not wanting to continue. I've already spoken for a long time, but I just want to express my deep sense of gratitude to you, Vaikoji, for inviting me here for this evening's function. I always love coming to Chennai. There is some chemistry between me and my friends here, and it's that chemistry which draws me to all of you. So thank you all very much. Thank you and Jai Hind.